The Right and Wrong series. This series of videos have been great on the channel, and it's one that I enjoy making as it allows me to go outside my comfort zones and try new games and media, some of which you guys have suggested to me. But you didn't come to hear me talk about myself in this series. You're either here because I put a character in a thumbnail you don't agree with being good or bad, or you're interested in what makes a great and terrible villainess. Well, here's the thing about writing a good female villains.
I think of a man, and I take away reason and accountability.
No, permission not granted.
Oh no, somebody's going to get an email.
Gee, I wonder how fast I can get people to misrepresent the video. But no, funny enough, the way to make a good villainess is the same way you make a good villain. You need to have good motivation, good intimidation, and in my personal opinion, making them entertaining.
I reject my humanity!
So today we'll talk about some of the good, some of the bad, and some of the weird villainous in gaming. And maybe somewhere else too, never know with me. Spoilers for the following games and pieces of media. I'm MangaKamen, and let's get bad.
This diva needs her stage!
Miles Morales is a bit of a hot topic character, and no, not because of...
Life is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
It's because of a lot of different factors going on, and with the character, one of which is his rogues gallery. Now, I brought this up in a video not too long ago, talking about how Miles should have his own set of original villains, and not just repurposed villains from Peter Parker's camp. I mean, if you look at another character who adopted the title of another hero, Terry McGinnis' Batman, he had his own cast of villains, and when he did get some of Batman's original villains like Mr. Freeze, they didn't repurpose the character, they actually did something new with the original one.
You gotta get out of here, Freeze. The whole place is gonna go.
Believe me, you're the only one who cares.
God, if only someone were to talk about that episode sometime, but who are we gonna find to do that? But since a few villains like the Spot and the Prowler were repurposed for Miles and managed to make great impressions, I'd say it's a step in the right direction, but personally speaking, I prefer there being more original villains to Miles.
Why is it the good villains never die? Clark, what the hell are good villains?
Now, in a video where we're supposed to be talking about villainesses, why am I bringing up Miles Morales? He certainly isn't a woman.
Okay, I'm very confused by what's going on here.
Well, in the Insomniac spin-off game, Spider-Man and Miles Morales, there was a repurposing of one of the webhead's lesser-known villains, the Tinkerer, otherwise known as Finn Mason.
Holy 4th of July weenie roast. What the hell am I looking at?
Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't going to be, oh, they raced and gender-swapped this character, therefore she's automatically bad. Grrr. No, that has nothing of the sort with this. Here on the MangaKamen channel, we look at the actual writing of a character before labeling them as garbage and throwing them in the proper bins. You see, there was a great setup for Finn to be a good foil to Miles. Both characters lost someone important in their lives, but the big difference between the two is that Miles was able to get through the death of his father because of a good support system that he had, which turned his grief into a force of good. Meanwhile, Finn wasn't able to get that same treatment when her brother died, and turned to a life of crime and using her talent in creating scientific gadgets to enable a ton of goons to work for her. Essentially, her grief was the catalyst for evil motivation. This is a classic juxtaposition between a hero and a villain, and one that could have worked well with Finn here. Throw in the fact that she was also old friends with Miles, and you have a villain who has a good contrast with the hero as well as a personal connection. It has a great setup for a good villain. The problem is that Insomniac was attempting to make Finn into a sympathetic character, but unfortunately botched the execution of it. There's nothing wrong with making a character sympathetic, especially villain. However, when the villain continues to be a horrible person throughout the story, that sympathy can quickly dry up. So let's explain this. The major plot of the story is that there's a corporation named Roxxon, who is providing energy through an unstable compound. Said compound made Finn's brother Rick sick. And when he was attempting to destroy the compound new form, Rick dies at the hands of Roxxon's president, Krieger. Finn's goal is to topple Roxxon, and in order to do that, she plans on using the new form to destroy the Roxxon Plaza. That's a very broad generalization of the plot, but I'll explain more as the video goes on. Early in the game, one of Finn's goals is to steal the new form that's being transported across New York. In order to create a distraction, Finn chooses to have her goons known as the Underground attack the plaza, while Miles' mother is holding a political rally against Roxxon. A fight ensues, and Miles' mother gets injured in the process. Now, the idea of causing a distraction in order to create a smokescreen for your real target is smart. What isn't is the fact that Finn had to make the conscious decision to attack the rally, and put people whom she is supposedly close to in danger. We get a scene later where this happens.
Really sorry your mom got hurt at her rally. If that new Spider-Man hadn't shown up, everyone would have been fine.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
I'm sorry, but you picked a location for your attack that included people who invited you over for Christmas dinner. Not a joke, by the way, that actually happened at the beginning of the game. Yeah, if it was the Spider-Man, that gang of criminals that obviously wouldn't take things too far wouldn't for anyone, except for security and, anyone else who would try to stop them. Finn, I don't think that— Shut up, Miles. And this never actually gets brought up or challenged, and it really makes Finn out to be an outright villain, when the story is going out of its way to try to make her sympathetic, but her actions contradict that notion. This isn't the only time that points to this, though. Take, for example, the Underground, which uses the new form to power their nanotechnology. In a number of instances in the game, we're shown that some of the members are actually getting sick, and it's implied that it's the same illness that affected Finn's brother. And she doesn't care. I'm sorry, what? This wouldn't be a problem if the game actually treated Finn as an actual straight-up evildoer, but the game really tries its best to make you sympathize with her, and there are multiple times where Miles will come off as if he's in the wrong for doing things. One such example is when Finn gets mad at Miles for hiding the fact that he was Spider-Man from her. Sure, considering that the two are close, it would make sense, especially since Spider-Man has been getting in her way. However, it's really hypocritical to hide the fact that your brother, who the game establishes had a bond with Miles, died, especially since Rick is portrayed to have an effect on both Finn and Miles when they were younger. It gets even more dumb when Finn uses this mistrust not to listen to Miles about how Krieger sabotaged the generator that Finn was going to use to blow up Roxxon Plaza. And it would actually take out Harlem too, which is kinda stupid since if her plan did go through, it would have been blamed on terrorist acts. Which, Krieger wouldn't be wrong about that. The problem with Finn here is that we're expected to sympathize with her character, but the game fails to make me actually like her as such. There's nothing wrong with being a straight up villain, but when you're trying to sympathize with a villain like that, it's hard to do so. One last example is when you're chasing Finn, she's willing to blow up apartment buildings to get around, and even blow up cars.
It is not going well. Where are you? I don't know. I'm dodging explosions. I need a new strategy.
So if you think about it, she's killing people to get away from Miles. Oh yeah, just kill people who have nothing to do with this. That's the way to make me like ya. So when Finn sacrifices herself at the end of the game, Insomniac were probably thinking, "This is perfect! With her sacrificing herself, we've solidified her as a tragic character! Hooray!" Meanwhile, I'm sitting here in my chair going, "Good, she's gone." And that's something you don't want your audience to go through. I mean, at the very least, Finn was an active participant in the story and just didn't wait on the sidelines until the very end. Hint, hint. In my humble opinion, one of the weakest villains in a game is one that does not interact with the heroes of the story for the most of it. Normally, this is regulated to the big bad of the story, but it's not as if the final enemy of a game or story interacting through the game is a foreign concept. Hell, the last example, aside from the attempt to make her sympathetic, Finn had the basis for being a great villain because of the connection she has with Miles in the game. The problem was the writing failed in the sympathy department. While this isn't set in stone, I find the fact that a villain has a personal connection with the main character, and we can actually see interactions between the hero and villain, to be fun. Because while you don't need to have the hero sling insults with the villain throughout the game, it's a more amazing dynamic for storytelling.
Well done. Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
It's why when you look towards a character like GLaDOS, a character who's constantly used throughout Portal to interact with the player or Shell, whichever you prefer, it's why she's viewed as more iconic of a villain and why she's still quoted to this day. The cake is a lie, bitch. However, there are times where villains that can be compelling who don't show up until the halfway point or the ending. It really all depends on what you're going for with that one. If you're going for like a deity-like entity, like say Jubileus from Bayonetta, having the bosses mention her name when they die to alert you that she exists is a fun way of doing it. Then it's satisfying to throw a god into the sun. But let's talk about another villain who is similar in that vein, Ultimecia from Final Fantasy VIII. To give context, Ultimecia is the ultimate sorceress of Final Fantasy VIII, who's the first woman main antagonist in the series. with her ultimate goal of compressing time and space so she could become a god while becoming one with existence. Some people could probably argue that Shinoa from Final Fantasy VII could be the first female antagonist, but I see her more as a catalyst with Sephiroth still holding the reins. But that's neither here or there.
There is logic in what he says.
For most of the game, you don't really know who Ultimecia is. She's more of a puppet master villain, which there's nothing wrong with. She basically controls characters like Edna or Rinoa so she could create time compression in the past. But she needs to go back further in order to do it, so her goal is to possess a character named Alone who has the natural ability to send people even further into the past. So, plan-wise, pretty solid. Go back to the past, possess the young lady who can go back even further in time, and cast the spell so you can become one with all reality and become a god. She's also a threat. I mean, we're talking about a magical being who can warp space and time, and can control people to do her will. And in all honesty, that hairstyle could probably poke your eye out. But the problem with Ultimecia, that's pretty much all about her.
You're so evil, it's boring!
She's not a well-developed character, despite the fact, technically speaking, she possesses the first antagonist in the game, Edna. She basically becomes more of a standardized villain, and there really isn't any sort of backstory given to the game. However, there was something from Word of God that explained that Ultimecia was a sorceress whom, since being a child, had been repeatedly attacked and hated by everyone around her for the crimes of those who possessed her powers before her. She became isolated, began to become bitter and twisted all about it. Then, learning of Alone and the machine that she made based on Alone's power, she decided to create a world where only she could live. She could compress time into one instant and use her powers to exist outside of frozen reality. However, her own actions in the past instead are what caused her suffering in the future. Her hatred caused a loop that would forever hurt her. This was also somewhat brought up in Destania Opera Omnia, but again, that was done after the fact. Now, this would be good, but it isn't really communicated well in the game, and even then, I couldn't find where that source was that brought up that backstory.
Citation needed. Citation fucking needed.
I'm willing to admit I'm wrong on that, but I still find it to be bad writing when you have to explain your story after the fact. Which sucks, because that backstory actually is pretty good. It wouldn't have made Ultimecia a good villain, though, because she still lacks a personality other than, I want to be a god!
And what is a god to a non-believer?
You don't need a deep personality for a villain, but when it's the big bad, I find it to be a bit more of an issue to like the character when they're essentially one note and boring. I try not to use the same examples that I've used in the past, but considering that I do think that Lusamine is probably the best and worst example of a villainess in Pokemon, I'd have to talk about her to some degree again. After all, in the initial version of Sun and Moon, Lusamine was a mother who was obsessed with the Ultra Beast and was rather abusive because of her removed inhibitions. I'm moving a little fast here, so you need to consider that Lusamine, for being the first female main villain in Pokemon's history, the developers actually managed to change things up from the usual standard fare of Pokemon villains, because Lusamine started out relatively innocent. Her idea wasn't rooted in oddities like expanding the land or wanting to rewrite the universe. Lusamine was trying to find her husband who had disappeared in a wormhole, and Lusamine was racked with grief. She dove into the research of the Ultra Beasts and at times came in contact with Nihilego, making a downward spiral of tragedy. Nihiligo's toxin affected Lusamine and changed her as a person, making her inhibitions disappear. Her ideals of beauty and ambition to protect and preserve Pokemon became twisted, even to the point where she froze Pokemon into Pokepops so they could remain in their beautiful forms and remain safe. And then there were her kids, Lily and Gladion. Seeing them as nothing more as a distraction as her search for her husband quickly became a quest for the Ultra Beasts, and in turn she saw them as ugly, even going so far as attempting to dress Lily to look like Nihilego. Then when her kids ran away, she sees it as a betrayal, especially taking Cosmog and Type Null with them. It's an interesting spiral into insanity, especially when she reaches Ultra Space, and thanks to the toxin, she's long gone. It makes Lily's confrontation with her mother a bit sad too, since the person before her is no longer the caring mother she knew growing up, gone because of the toxin that created her obsession. And when all is said and done, Lusamine has a long road ahead of her for recovery. It's even more tragic when you realize that there really wasn't any malicious intent from Nihilego. It's mostly just a parasite that used its toxin as a defense mechanism, and that makes the situation all the more tragic. Now, to point out, Lusamine did a lot of bad things. She turned her father's organization into something horrible, she hired Team Skull to do grunt work for her, she abused her kids, and who knows how many Poke Popsicles are in the Aether Foundation as we speak. But here's the thing, when we get to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, all those bad things are still there, but the Ultra Beast obsession is gone, as well as the contamination of Nihiligo's poison, and the motivation is to stop Necrozma, and her goal is to take care of the threat herself, so she's making an active choice and not under the influence of a toxin. Alright, a couple questions. Even though they cut a good chunk of references to the abuse and such, why did she want to essentially use Nebby to the point of death knowing that the Ultra Recon Squad were a thing? Why does she still have Flash Bros and Pokepops in her office? They essentially changed the character from having a tragic reason for her devolving into insanity and just made her a shitty person who was willing to act this way, and then gave her a redemption afterwards? And it wasn't even that good of a redemption. I'm just glad it didn't go with the anime version of her character.
See, now that's my cute little girl. Don't forget, you'll always be my sweet little baby.
Gag me. I've heard there's a bit of a stigma of stories about evil mothers in Japan. I'm not sure how true that is, but it certainly would explain this rewrite of a character in the Ultra games. Honestly, it kinda sucks because not only do you have a great design for a villainess, you effectively sideline the first major villainess for Necrozma, and while trying to keep the elements from the original games that don't really fit with the new story. I'm not saying that Pokemon Sun and Moon have the perfect story for the series, but it was a fascinating concept and explored rather well, and to see that tossed away was just bad. It makes Lusamine's actions no longer make sense when they changed her motivation. Now, if you want to have Necrozma be the major threat, you should have had it be on top of Lusamine's. Have her reckless opening of Ultra Holes be what awakens the monster and catches its attention. Then you'd still have Necrozma boss fight and not make your first lady main antagonist look like a monster that everyone forgives immediately, and you ignore that amazing tragic backstory. It's just annoying, really.
You know how much I sacrificed?
You don't trust anybody, that's your problem.
When it comes to making a compelling villainess, one of the best ways is to make the audience think if they're a hero or a villain. After all, when it comes to villains, some of the best are those who are a villain due to the tragedy of circumstance, where they have to be the villain in order to fulfill their morals and follow what they believe in.
Politics determine who you face on the battlefield, and politics are a living thing. They change along with the times. Yesterday's good might be tomorrow's evil.
Even if they must become a tool, inadvertently become a monster.
A soldier has to follow whatever orders he's given. It's not his place to question why, but you're looking for a reason to fight. You are a natural-born fighter, but you're not quite a soldier. A soldier is a political tool, nothing more. That's doubly true if he's a career soldier. Right and wrong have no place in his mission. He has no enemies and no friends. Only the mission.
That's what being a soldier is.
In the end, you have to choose whether you're going to live as a soldier or just another man with a gun. There's a saying in the Orient, loyalty to the end. Do you know what it means?
Being patriotic.
It means devoting yourself to your country.
This, my friends, is the boss. The boss is probably one of the more tragic figures I can talk about when it comes to gaming villainists, because there's an argument to be made that she's not a villain, rather a character who's forced into the role. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The boss is the secondary antagonist of Metal Gear Solid 3, starting off, however, as a codec contact with Snake. The two hold a very interesting relationship with each other, more than just a regular student-teacher bond that would entail that. While the boss did train Snake to be the soldier that he is at that point in time, she was also a motherly figure to him. At the beginning of the game, she acts as a simple codec contact, claiming to be communicating with Snake in a submarine deep in the Atlantic Ocean. However, when you're about to complete your mission, suddenly the boss appears before you, carrying 2 Davy Crockett nuclear missile launchers.
It's over.
Well, that's not right. Obviously something is amiss here, because she also says that she's defecting to the Russians, and more specifically, working under the main antagonist of the game, Vulcan. Vulcan's goal is to take over the Soviet Union with his small army, vast fortune, and the Shagohod, a massive tank that can fire nukes. We also have to worry about the fact that the boss brought with her the elite team of soldiers that she was the leader of in World War II, the Cobra unit. Each of them deadly with their own set of skills and weird powers. I mean, we're talking about a guy with hornets in his body that he can control his mind, an old man who apparently can do photosynthesis, a Russian cosmonaut who loves fire, and a friggin' ghost.
And I've decided that I want to die.
Look, when you make the guy who's got a snake tongue look the most normal of the group, you got yourself a nasty troop of bad guys.
Major, why do they keep exploding?
So let's pause here and talk about the setup for the boss as a villain. She has a personal connection with the main character, Snake, and as such, when the boss defects to work with Vulcan, we have an emotional tension betrayal can cause. It doesn't help that the boss breaks Snake's arm in the process. In one scene, we're given not only a motivation because the boss stopped our mission and made the situation worse since she captured the scientist that we were sent in to rescue, but we're also given a demonstration just how capable of a combatant she is, as well as the resources that she has at her disposal. But here's the rub of it all. Why did she do this? From what we understand of the character at this point in the game, she's known as the Mother of Special Forces, and was the embodiment of the most loyal soldier. What caused her to want to betray her country and join up with a monster like Vulcan? I'll get to that in a moment, but I want to point out that one of the aspects that I enjoy about the boss is that her personality is that of a cool and collected motherly figure, as demonstrated when she can even topple over Vulcan.
Stay out of this!
She acts as a good counter to the depravity of Vulcan, who...
Who are you?
Isn't a very nice person, as well as the reckless abandon of Ocelot, even at times lambasting him for his reckless behavior. It's a nice middle ground, and everyone knows that she can take them down if she wanted. Hell, Vulcan's just glad she's on his side. But now we get to her motivations. As it turns out, the boss is actually a double agent who was tasked with getting the microfilm that allowed Vulcan to fund his operations, the Philosopher's Legacy. Unfortunately, due to Vulcan using the Davy Crockett newts on Soviet soil, that complicated matters. In order to make things better between the Soviets and the United States, Snake was tasked to take out the boss. She was essentially being used as a fall guy for the incident. The boss is willing to do this because she's a good soldier and believes that it's for a good cause, to unite the world. She's also so loyal that she's willing to sacrifice her life for the greater good. She's a soldier, she has trust in her government, and her role is to follow orders until the very end. And Snake is a soldier too. It's his mission to kill her. The boss is a great villain because she's forced to become that role, and it shows the audience what can and can't be considered a villain. After all, the boss even says this:
Yesterday's good might be tomorrow's evil.
What you view as an enemy is heavily dependent. Who you view as a villain may only be because you're simply told that they are the villain. Because as the story of the boss goes, even though she does what she does for her country, to the rest of history, she'll be seen as a villain, even more so when you consider what her ideals would go on to be the catalyst for the rest of the series of Metal Gear Solid, with her goal of uniting the people of the world being warped. And I think that's amazing for a villainess. Throughout this video, I'm sure there's a thought coursing through your mind. Hey Kamen, these traits you find interesting or bad for villainists are the same you talk about with villains. And that's absolutely correct. To me, it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a gal or somewhere in between. If you're a great villain, then the aspects don't change. Good writing is good writing, and bad writing is bad. Don't get me wrong, you can certainly use a person's gender as an aspect towards their character in writing. Lusamine being a prime example of that since she's a mother, or the boss who is a motherly figure to Snake. It adds more to the emotional connection to the characters in that regard. But when I see a villain, I don't automatically assume that they're good or bad, especially when it comes to their gender. When I see a male villain, I don't automatically think, oh, he's badass. If you see any of my videos talking about how to make a good and bad villain, it should be clear on that. Likewise, when I see a woman as a villain, I don't automatically think she's bad. It's dependent on how the writing handles the villain. If Finn the Tinkerer was a man in the game, and was written the exact same way, I'd still complain about the writing choices that were made. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that I want good villainesses. I want to explore the amazing ideas that come from having lovely ladies as the main focus of being an antagonist in the story. I think we all want that. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and comment. We get to 10,000 likes and I'll make another fun video, maybe focusing on redemption this time around. And if you don't know what to say in a comment, how about Pokepops? That way it tells me you got to this point in the video. Plus, hey, it's always fun to have people show up in the comments down below and wonder what the hell is going on here. I'm MangaKamen, and thanks for watching. Later, everyone.